Hi, everybody. My name is Chip Jacobs, and I am a Los Angeles-based author and journalist. Delighted to be on a Zoom discussion with three really excellent music writers. We're all contributors to this terrific book, Go Further. It's part of a series of books about literary appreciations of power pop, which is a genre that we all still love. We're happy to have John M. Borak here. He is a veteran music journalist who currently serves as a contributing editor at Goldmine Magazine, a monthly music collections periodical. John is the author of three books: Shake Some Action, The Ultimate Power Pop Guide; John Lennon, Life is What Happens, which is a book I have to read next; and Shake Some Action 2.0, a guide to the 200 greatest power pop albums, 1970 through 2017. His forthcoming book is another one I'm going to be getting for sure, Beatles 100, scheduled for publication by Rare Bird Books, and is exceedingly proud of his children and ever-expanding music and memorabilia collection. Our other next guest is Jordan Oakes, who founded, published, and edited Yellow Pills, a power pop magazine that started in 1991 and later compiled 5 Yellow Pill CD compilations starting in 93. He is a very well-traveled journalist who's appeared in Sound Choices, Speak, the Riverfront Times, the Christian Science Monitor, and Rolling Stone's Alt Rock Orama book, and elsewhere. He's a published poet and occasional stand-up comedian. And so we're going to ask you to do a 5-minute set.
Yeah, I figured that would enter the picture at some point.
Yeah.
Some power pop comedy. Yeah.
A power pop comedy. He loves dogs and dog-eared magazines. God bless you. Our other esteemed guest is Ira Robbins, who co-founded Trouser Press magazine in 1974 and was the pop music editor at Newsday in the 1990s. Gosh, I mean, I bet you have some incredible stories. In addition to 5 decades of music journalism, he's the author of 2 novels, Kick It Till It Breaks and Mark Bolan Killed and Crashed. That's just a terrific title. He currently edits trouserpress.com. So gents, you know, there's your pedigrees. Fantastic to have you on. How's it going in your neck of the woods? Where's everybody? Ira, tell people where you're talking from.
Brooklyn, New York.
And how is Brooklyn as we come out of this dark tunnel of a time?
Coming back to life, somewhat overtaken by street crime and trying to figure out who our next mayor is going to be out of a field of like 12.
Yeah,
we're in the middle of our mayoral election.
Yeah, I've heard about that. So in other words, turbulent life returning to normal.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Jordan, where are you talking from? What's happening in your?
Yeah, I'm talking from my messy office here in St. Louis, and it's not one of the most exciting cities. Actually, it's kind of underrated. We have a great zoo here, and some great restaurants and some of the best gas stations in America. Frankly, I don't know what that meant, but anyway, a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
As a Dodgers fan, I don't know how I feel about St. Louis because
it's a big Cardinals.
Yeah, I blinked my eyes whenever the Dodgers are playing the Cardinals. It's some guy named Matt hitting a 500-foot home run. So there must be a Matt factory in St. Louis. I'm pretty sure. Ira, so I think
you didn't ask John.
I'm sorry, John. Where are you speaking from? And
you actually mentioned I'm speaking from Orange County, California, city of Fountain Valley, where there is really no fountains or valleys. And I'm about 20 minutes from Disneyland. Wow. So that's where I'm talking to you from. And my mom was from Brooklyn, so I have a connection to Ira. And I think I had gas in St. Louis once, so I have a.
You know how that goes, right? Yeah.
I have to. How many CDs do you have behind you? Because it looks like Pooh-Bah Records in my native Pasadena back in the 80s.
I remember Pooh-Bah fondly. Used to go there all the time when I lived near there. You know, I've never counted. There's more in front of me and on top of me, and to my right, and to my left. I have no idea. Too many.
Yeah. I just finished an inventory of my collection using Discogs.com, which is particularly convenient for that. And I toted up vinyl CDs and cassettes, 35,000 titles at the moment.
Wow.
Well, Ira has me beat by far.
Yeah.
How do you catalog that many records, Ira? I mean, I'm amazed.
Discogs.com has like a barcode reader function, but it took a year.
Okay. Oh,
it took a year of back and forth to my cellar to pull out a box, go through a drawer. I just got, it was kind of like a pandemic project.
Sure, that sounds great. I wish I could do that. Yeah.
I was so tired of, I personally had a big album collection that I carried over from the 70s, and then couldn't find a record player and everybody's going to CDs. So then I thinned out my collection, went to CDs, and I just recently got rid of almost all of them except for my three favorite bands, Beatles, Squeeze, and Zeppelin. And I didn't know what to do with them. I've heard people saying, you take them down to a store and you get $7, and it's crazy. Now I'm sure I'll wish I kept them some, but do you ever find that you're kind of trying to chase technology, the next media, and you don't know what to do with the previous iteration?
Mostly with computer media. I've got like 5-inch discs that I have stuff on that I would really like to be able to get back from like the 80s, and it's like no chance. I can't find a 5-inch drive anywhere.
Yeah.
Same here. I just had that very same issue and could not find anybody to transfer it.
And and we all have reel-to-reels and cassettes and things that I mean, I don't have a DAT machine, so I've got all sorts of media that I don't have players for. I don't have I've never had a mini disc player, and I have like 3 mini discs.
Yeah, I think I have one of those. Yeah, somewhere. Right. How about 8-track?
No, I have some 8-tracks, but I've never had an 8-track player. I bought them just for collector's value.
Whoa, see, that's cool.
See that.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's great, John.
It's a Dwight Twilley band 8-track.
On 8-track, right? Wow. Yeah.
Life was so much simpler with 8-tracks and serial killers and roller skate.
Sort of was. That's a song, isn't it? Anyway.
So nostalgic. So I'm gonna start with you, John, with my first question. So you wrote about a band called the Shivers, which is one, to my great shame, I had never heard of before. But so, I mean, what drew you to their sound? What clicked in you when you heard them, and why did you decide to write an essay about them?
Well, for whatever reason, and I'm still not sure why this is, but we discussed it a little bit in my chapter on the Shivers. There's not too many female-fronted power pop bands. And Shivers was one of the few from around the era of 1979, 1980, who did power pop. They were associated a little bit with Eric Carmen. He was going to produce them and that sort of thing. And they covered Raspberry songs in their live set. So they were definitely power pop all the way. Never hit it big, probably because they came from Milwaukee, which is not exactly your hotbed of power pop or music in general, and just never really broke out from there. Only had one single at the time that was released, a great single called Teen Line, which is exceedingly rare if you can even find it now. It trades for a lot of money. But I had heard a couple of their songs on a compilation CD that came out years ago on a label called Hyped to Death. Jordan might remember that label.
Yep.
Right.
And I always wanted to find out more about them. And then in 2014, suddenly a vinyl issue came out of Teen Line, along with its B-side, along with 12 or so other tracks that had been recorded around that time. I listened to it and thought, wow, this is like the great lost power pop album. It had the melodies, the harmonies, the whole 9 yards. So I wanted to find out more. So I hooked up online and met Jill Kasoris, again, lead singer and songwriter. We developed sort of a online friendship. And then when the time came for Go Further, I think I had written a bit about them in my essay in Go All the Way, or somebody had. And Steve Coulter, who was the co-editor of Go All the Way and Go Further, asked me if I wanted to write something on the Shivers, and I jumped at the chance. I thought it was a story that needed to be told from a lot of different perspectives.
Cool. Well, I want to ask you about that band, and especially about their decision not to come to LA. And she mentions Tom Petty doing it to chase their dreams. Jordan, so you wrote about Yellow Pills, a magazine that you helped start, and I actually worked at a magazine in the late 80s in the world of national security, but they were putting out their own publication, and it wasn't easy to do a press, without today's easy, digital design, et cetera.
Right.
What was it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, two-part question. Why did what drew you to start a magazine here? Was it because it wasn't being covered? It was, the song that was in a genre between the spaces. And what was it like in those crazy days of going to the photocopier and pasting up? Do you look back fondly on that?
Yeah, in a way, I mean, it was a lot of trial and error. I remember there was a place called Pip Printing, and we did the first issue there, and they got all the pages like out of order. We had like a box of 300, and we had to take them back, and then they wanted to do it some other way. And so, yeah, eventually we were able to sort of paste, sort of 8x11 sheets and shrink them down. So we got 4 of those on every 8x11 in the magazine. Somehow. So obviously no computer, except like the last issue or two. Yeah. We had someone do a layout on computer, but that's otherwise very rudimentary.
When you look back on it though, were they exhausting, chaotic times? And do you remember them fondly because of that?
Yeah, they were interesting times because this is when I met everyone like John. I used to read John stuff in Goldmine. Of course, Ira was a big influence on my writing. So yeah, it was just kind of, I felt like there was a void there, and it was fun because it was right before computers were something everyone had. So it was telephone. Like I remember David Bash called me one day. I'm David Bash. So I was getting all these calls, and it was just great. And and then at some point I would get calls from some of the bands, and that was just insane. I was just such a fanboy there. It was amazing.
And did you, just real quickly, did you feel like the big publications neglected power pop? Did you feel that it was, this gem that wasn't getting any light shown on it?
Yeah, I really did. I mean, there were magazines that covered power pop, but there wasn't any like a magazine that just focused on power pop. I felt like the Bump, obviously Trouser Press would write about power pop, and I learned about a lot of great bands through them. But I just felt like there was a void there, and it was just out of wanting to write about it. Sort of, it wasn't like I saw this great void and well, here's an opportunity to come up with this magazine. It just sort of happened. It was it was hearing a lot of neat new bands, Matthew Sweet, and all the kind of pop bands that came out around then, and it was just a nice kind of merging of factors, I think, somehow.
Yeah, well, it worked. Ira, I have to say, I loved your opening of your essay. And you managed to pack just a lot of interesting ideas in. And you talked about, you started Trouser Press out of rash hubris, know-it-all certainty, in the attempt to rate power pop bands of the late 70s, even as you admit the endeavor is doomed. So there's both like wide-eyed optimism and just a little kind of grazing fatalism all in that. And so why did you decide to devote part of your life to doing this? Did you feel there was too much attention on classic rock and punk and new wave? Can you just elaborate about, why you, decided to, rate these bands?
Well, we started Trouser Press as a way of remedying what we thought was an absence of coverage of British historical music in American music magazines. And as the British scene evolved forward, and as we evolved forward, we got more involved with like American independent music and British, sort of not underground exactly, but sort of like the rising tide of like bands that weren't just major label bands. So, like the formation of Stiff Records and Chiswick Records were huge, big deals for us, as was, like the rise of like Rhino and Bomp and the scene in Carborough, North Carolina, all those things. Power pop was just kind of like a natural realm for us to focus on. I mean, it wasn't the only one. I mean, we were also covering prog rock and punk and a lot of other things. Yeah. But, I've always been a pop fan. And so, it was certainly a passion of mine. And, we tried to be, I don't know, not exactly, we were never trying to be a consumer guide, but we tried to kind of wrap our arms around subjects in the magazine. We did like a big because we didn't understand it at all. We did a big thing on hardcore at one point. We had somebody in LA write a whole big piece about like why Black Flag mattered and stuff, which we didn't really understand for ourselves. And we
Black Flag.
Yeah. And we did a whole big thing once on Australia. So, I mean, we were kind of like ambitious in that sense. And, we were trying to be useful and kind of visionary. And so power pop was something that I cared about a lot. And it felt like there was a lot of bands around. And, very much in the same way that, a few years down the road, we put together a book of, new wave records. I mean, that was our idea of sort of codifying that whole genre. I just kind of thought that I could kind of share with the readers, what I thought power pop amounted to and who was performing it. But the piece that I did for the book is really about, how wrong I was in many cases, and how the narrow view that I was able to muster, in that year was very different than what we've all come to understand about power pop in the retrospect. And I think what I kind of conclude in the piece is really that power pop was never really a thing until it was, sort of in the rear view mirror, not permanently, but at least partially, so that you could kind of see who was and who wasn't power pop. And just to digress for a second, I kind of disagree with my colleagues on certain power pop bands, because I have a very strict dividing line about what is and what isn't power pop. And I suppose we can get into that later. But for me, innocence is absolutely crucial. Naivete, kind of like, winsomeness. So for me, power pop has always been about longing, not about lust. And that's why I've always disqualified the Knack and the Raspberries from my personal view of power pop, because they were both, much too sex oriented and so and cocky in a way for my taste.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Even if you think about the song My Sharona, which was, I grew up on in high school, that is just a classic rock hook about lust, about, a thing growing down the side of the guy's leg with a really gnarly guitar, I mean, in some ways, I think it's like a guitar solo, disguised as a power pop song. The lyrics are just very simple, and it's terrific guitar. But I did notice, though, a commonality among all of you about what defines power pop in this great eternal debate that philosophers have been discussing since the Stone Age. I've heard, but it's got to be compact. It's got to have a tight verse, bridge, chorus. Right? It's no long Jimi Hendrix guitar solos. You mentioned innocence, but it's it never feels turgid. What do you think? Other guys want to chime in on that? Are there other disqualifiers for you about what constitutes power pop?
I think a great power pop song is generally under 4 minutes long.
Yeah.
It has to be compact. Has to have guitars. Helps if it has vocal harmonies, obviously. All the stuff that people know.
Yeah.
I agree with the winsomeness that Ira mentioned.
That's a good word.
Shoes are a great example of sort of that winsomeness and that sort of, gosh, I really want a girl, but I just can't seem to get one. That sort of lyrical.
That's what it's all about, right?
That sort of lyrical bent. Yeah. But I do disagree on Raspberries and the Knack. I think those are both great examples of power pop. A little more on the power side, but there's a lot of Raspberries songs that have that longing. I want to be with you is kind of has that. Let's pretend sort of has that. You sort of have to discount a lot of the non-Eric Carmen songs, though, if you're talking about Raspberries and power pop. Dave Smalley's tracks were more country rock, sort of Eagles influence. Wally Bryson was really a big fan of Free and the 70s rockers, but I still consider them power pop. I don't know what Jordan thinks.
Jordan, to me, it's not so much about the lyrics or the view or innocence. It's about the sound. So there are a lot of bands who have sort of a power pop sound, but maybe the lyrics, even Shoes, I think they have like 2 songs that aren't about love and romance, The Tube and Capital Gain. those are power pop songs, nothing about love in those. And I'm a big fan of Scott Miller, the Game Theory and the Loud Family. And a lot of people would think of them as too avant-garde, maybe, or kind of, experimental. But to me, and Scott never really wrote one love song. I mean, when you think about it, there may be one that came out later. But at the same time, it was power pop to me. He kind of remade it in his own image. And to me, I love bands who kind of do that. They take power pop and kind of make it their own. To me, that's a huge thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just a lightning round question. Ira, what was the best power pop band concert you've ever seen in person?
Yes. I don't know, maybe Shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen Shoes a bunch of times. They're pretty great as a power pop band on stage. Seen Paul Collins play. He's really great as a power pop artist. No, I mean, I've seen a lot of shows. It's hard to pick any out, and I don't necessarily go to shows specifically because they're power pop. Trouser Press put on a show for our 40th anniversary in Brooklyn, and we had Pez Band and Dwight Twilley and Paul Collins and a few other bands. Shoes all played, and that was pretty great.
Yeah. John?
Well, it sounds like I wish I could have been there at that show Ira just described. That sounds pretty damn cool. I've seen so many power pop shows and sets, being here in LA, where a lot of the music festivals like Poptopia and International Pop Overthrows sort of started. Yeah. There's been a lot of acts who've come through here. It's really tough to pick one. The Raspberries reunion concerts, actually 2005, 6, 7, I saw a few of those, and those were pretty amazing, only because you never thought you'd see it happen.
Yeah.
Just because they had broken up, 40 years before. And just to hear those songs live on stage and, have them still sound good, that was pretty magical for someone who's been a fan of the genre as long as I've been.
Jordan, anything?
I think it was the Amy Grant show that I saw. No, it was Material Issue I saw in a basement, before I ever saw them before or really knew about them. This place called Cicero's, and they just rocked so hard. And I think they were like the greatest live power pop band I've ever seen. Paul Collins, who Ira mentioned, is great, especially when I saw him like 20 years ago. He just, had the audience in the palm of his hand. So I'd say Paul Collins and Material Issue are probably my two favorite power pop shows. Shoes are great too. They're very precision, rehearsed, but they do it great,
Yeah.
Jordan, not to interrupt, but now that you mention that, I remember seeing a double bill here in California, in the small town called Long Beach, California, early 90s.
Right.
It was Material Issue opening for Shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I had ever seen those bands, and I think it was just before the International Pop Overthrow album came out, Material Issue's debut. I was just blown away by both of those acts. So that was pretty cool because nothing like that ever happened around here.
Yeah. I'll chime in to say, I don't know how you guys feel about Squeeze. To me, they are the closest. I mean, everybody wants the poor Beatles albatross that gets stuck around people's necks. But when I saw Squeeze as, somebody still in mourning over John Lennon and, who believed there was still more albums in that band. When I saw Squeeze and their musical dexterity and their harmonies and how, they sung an octave apart but they joined together. And, you would, in the same concert, you'd hear power pop, you'd hear Elvis, you'd hear new wave, you'd hear rockabilly, but I think they still were power pop. They were still power pop connoisseurs, and it just stirred something in me, and I think that's the thing about power pop. I mean, Jill gave a really good definition of what power pop is, but to me, it's a feeling inside. I know back in my younger days, we'd get in long arguments about when bands started to sell out, right? And I was very disappointed when Cheap Trick's Dream Police, even though there was a lot of great songs on that. But I felt like they were becoming more commercial. Have there ever been bands that started new wave or prog or rock and then went into power pop? Has there ever been like a reverse evolution that you guys know of?
Flamin' Groovies.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you
The Scientists.
please elaborate. I'm really interested in this.
Flamin' Groovy started off as a garage rock, sort of R&B, Stonesy kind of band, and then became like the ultimate power pop band, and then went beyond that and became like a British invasion revival band, which is, technically power pop-ish, but far too derivative to be what we would think of as power pop, I would say.
Yeah.
But along the way, they made one of the 3 or 4 greatest power pop singles of all time, "Shake Some Action."
Yeah.
Yeah.
The quintessential power pop song.
Yeah, and do you guys know? I mean, are any bands you other guys know about that even for an album that shifted from one species and into the power pop genus?
The Scientists from Australia, they kind of started as this weird kind of bluesy, loud swamp rock thing, and then like Frantic Romantic. Frantic Romantic came out, and that was, that's a really good sort of punky power pop single. So the Scientists, they're kind of obscure, but they went pop at some point.
Yeah.
John? Yeah, I don't know, John.
I can't think of any examples as good as those two, especially the Flamin' Groovies. That's one I was going to mention. Jordan, speaking of Australia, reminded me of a band called DM3, another band called the Some Loves. Both of them included Dom Mariani, who began with a group called the Stems, who started out as a really garagey sort of band. And then there was a Some Loves album that came out in 1988. And then DM3, Dom's band, after that. And he became pure power pop after that, not really a hint of garage at all.
Yeah.
Great records.
Let me ask you, like, I'm a giant Kinks fan, but are the Kinks considered classic rock, or are they power pop? Because the Kinks can write themselves terrific songs with all the ingredients of power pop. But
they predate. I think they predate power pop. I mean, I kind of have Ira's view where, in retrospect, these bands sort of were the model for power pop, the Beatles, the Kinks, the Who, but they're not power pop because it didn't exist then. So yeah, kind of my
do they help create power pop? And if they help create it, aren't they part of it?
It's an interesting sort of chicken and egg question. I mean, I agree with what Jordan said, but I would argue also that, that by having written songs like Waterloo Sunset and Days and, See My Friends, that Ray really was creating, what we've seen carried forward as power pop. Melody, guitars, harmonies, but by that same argument, you're going to have to then include pretty much every pop band of the early 60s, from the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean on through to, the Beatles, and I mean, the Beatles obviously are an archetype for power pop, but, it'd be a hard argument to make the Beatles were ever a power pop band in the sense that we think of power pop.
Yeah, I see those bands, the Kinks, Who, Beatles, even as far back as Buddy Holly, as sort of blueprints for the genre, as opposed to being power pop bands, just because they have the sound. I mean, I guess you could use the analogy, Henry Ford invented the Model T, but he had nothing to do with the Maserati or the Prius.
Wait, he did
kind of the same thing.
I thought that he went, anyway.
So I mean, talking about the future, I mean, I am in a state of despair when I turn on the radio or hear my daughter's music, and there's not a chorus to be heard. There's not a beautiful guitar hook. There's not, an Eagles quality harmony. I mean, does power pop need an archaeologist? Does it need a mortician? Or does it just, I don't know. Does it need a therapist? I mean, how do we bring power pop back? I mean, are there current bands that are giving us some hope?
George? Well, yeah, but they're underground. They're underground bands. I don't think anything on the hit radio spectrum is power pop that I've heard.
And it never was. It never has been. The ironic essential element of power pop is that it's never been popular.
Right. Yeah. Songs will pop up here and there. Stacy's Mom, My Sharona.
Yeah.
What I Like About You, and then it'll power pop, and then it goes away again. But it's never really gone away.
Yeah.
It's always been there. Like Jordan says, it's underground. It's there. You just have to look for it a little harder.
Yeah, it's always going to be around too. I think it's always going to, be here in some way. There's going to be bands to carry it carry the torch, I think, endlessly.
In a way, it's kind of ironic. One of the best power pop albums that came out. I mean, I love The Wonders. I think that movie captures, to me, the innocence and the beauty and the conflict of bands very well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's ironic that it was about the 60s, but it came out in the 90s, and yet hopefully it reinvigorated bands or gave folks reason to go check back on them.
So
it's interesting.
Written by Adam Schlesinger.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's funny that, speaking of That Thing You Do, when they were looking for a theme song, so many established power pop acts wrote songs with the title That Thing You Do.
Yeah.
That didn't get chosen, but they came out later. The Knack had one. Dwight Twilley, I think, had one.
Yeah.
Right.
There were others too, but the one that got chosen was by somebody really no one had ever heard of. This fictional band,
right?
With Mike Viola and Adam Schlesinger.
Yeah.
Ira,
by the way, I was looking at the bands that you initially called power pop, and I almost fell over when you had Kiss in there, because
oh man, that's
I saw. I mean, that was just
check, please.
That was sticking dynamite in a theater. I saw Kiss in Magic Mountain in Southern California, like in 1978, and I swear to you, I mean, it might have been my first concert. I was like a wide-eyed high school sophomore, and you've seen these guys come out in the boots and glam and all black. Ace Frehley runs out, trips over a cord. He's so gacked out. And he falls directly on his face, on his guitar, and it created.
That's power pop.
And man, it was a burst of feedback that sent the crowd running. But I mean, Kiss and power. Maybe the structure of Kiss's songs.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm not standing by that opinion. That was what I thought at the time.
Yeah, but it does kind of say, you can't just look at the costume and the shtick. You have to listen to the song.
First, I look at the verse.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Their vocals, Kiss's vocals, I think, kind of fail them. Ultimately, I think vocals are important. Yeah. And I like the Gene Simmons solo album though. That has some good sort of popish stuff on it. But yeah.
But I mean, you can make the same argument about Kiss that you can make about Cheap Trick to a degree. I mean, that's where it gets fuzzy, because I mean, Cheap Trick's early records are pretty loud rock records. Yeah. And yet they had really good tunes. So,
but they could sing though. Cheap Trick could sing, and their songs were a little more Beatlesque than Kiss's, I think, for the most part.
Robin Zander is one of those rare vocalists that I think can sound like John Lennon and Paul McCartney.
Exactly.
There's not many who can do that.
That's right. All right, guys. Well, I'm getting the blinking light saying the Armageddon is upon us, or the end. So thank you very much. I wish I could go on longer. You all wrote terrific essays. I learned a lot from them, and I thought I was a music nerd a bit. So thank you very much. Have great days, and we'll see you on the other side, guys.
Yeah, right, great to see you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
be well, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, take care.